threat. Sirens sounded immediately in Israel. War is political, and this is a war of choice aimed at changing the regime in Iran. Iran tried to deliver on its threat of a devastating response aimed at the extensive network of U.S. bases in the Gulf. This was Qatar, as well as Israel.
Go, go, go! Get inside.
In Dubai, tourists looking for winter sun had a nasty reminder of the region's realities. Close by in Bahrain, this appears to be a strike aimed at the big U.S. naval base. Iran says it will use more powerful missiles than the ones it fired in last summer's war. An interceptor rocket went up. Iran will hope that as the days pass, the U.S. and Israel will start running out of defensive missiles. In Tehran, regime supporters rallied around the flag. It would take more than killing the supreme leader to destroy the regime. It has a complex political system underpinned by ideology, corruption, and the ruthless use of force against dissent. In January, big protests against threat.
We're reminded that we live in an era of great power rivalry, that the rules-based order is fading, that the strong can do what they can and the weak must suffer what they must. And this aphorism of Thucydides is presented as inevitable, as the natural logic of international relations reasserting itself. And faced with this logic, there is a strong tendency for countries to go along to get along, to accommodate, to avoid trouble, to hope that compliance will buy safety. Well, it won't. So what are our options? In 1978, the Czech dissident Václav Havel, later president, wrote an essay called The Power of the Powerless. And in it, he asked a simple question: how did the communist system sustain itself? And his answer began with the greengrocer. Every morning, the shopkeeper places a sign in his window: "Workers of the world unite." He doesn't believe it. No one does. But he places the sign anyway to avoid trouble, to signal compliance, to get along. And because every shopkeeper on every street does the same, the system persists. Not through violence alone, but through the participation of ordinary people in rituals they privately know to be false. Havel called this living within a lie. The system's power comes not from its truth, but from everyone's willingness to perform as if it were true. And its fragility comes from the same source. When even one person stops performing, when the greengrocer removes his sign, the illusion begins to crack. Friends, it is time for companies and countries to take their signs down. For decades. For decades, countries like Canada prospered under what we called the rules-based international order. We joined its institutions, we praised its principles, we benefited from its predictability. And because of that, we could pursue values-based foreign policies under its protection. We knew the story of the international rules-based order was partially false, that the strongest would exempt themselves when convenient, that trade rules were enforced asymmetrically. And we knew that international law applied with varying rigor depending on the identity of the accused or the victim. This fiction was useful. And American hegemony in particular helped provide public goods, open sea lanes, a stable financial system, collective security, and support for frameworks for resolving disputes. So we placed the sign in the window. We participated in the rituals. And we largely avoided calling out the gaps between rhetoric and reality. This bargain no longer works. Let me be direct. We are in the midst of a rupture, not a transition.
At 1:08 a.m., inside a secured operations room in Ottawa, inside a document appeared on a screen that was never meant to be seen outside on a screen that was never meant to be seen outside a tightly controlled circle in Washington. Before any public reaction, before any official acknowledgement, public reaction, trajectory before of a major geopolitical conflict, the trajectory of a major geopolitical conflict carried internal projections tied to the document carried internal projections tied to terror strategies. It explosive was not Donald Trump, but what made it explosive, it was not the assumptions behind themselves. Assumptions that painted Canada as dependent, assumptions that painted Canada as dependent, constrained, within minutes of reviewing the material, Canadian officials within minutes of reviewing the material, extraordinary. Canadian officials the United States something extraordinary. Not the United States, not tactically, but structurally. Not slightly, not tactically. Before we roll the footage, just one thing. If you enjoy our work, drop a like and hit subscribe. If you enjoy our work, drop a like and hit subscribe. Over 98% of you are watching without subscribing. Let's change that right now. Everything we do. It's free for you. Subscribe, but it fuels perfect. Everything we do. Enjoy the video. Subscribed? Perfect. At the center of the response stood Mark Carney. At the center of whose career had been built on understanding systemic risk long before it became visible to others, and who now approached this moment not as a political confrontation, but as an opportunity, not as a political confrontation, but as an opportunity in a way that would outlast any single administration in a way that would outlast any single administration in Washington. And that silence was deliberate, not react because what he saw in that silence was not just a threat. Because what he saw in that document was not just a threat, and if those expectations could be invalidated, the entire strategy built on them would collapse under its own weight. Strategy built on them, inciting events that set everything in motion, had taken place events that set everything in motion, had taken place weeks earlier into the night in a closed-door meeting that stretched late into the night, where Carney convened a small group of economists to examine the long-term implications of escalating tariff rhetoric coming from the United States. Of escalating tariff rhetoric coming from the United States. What began evolved into something far more consequential. Quickly evolved into something far more assumptions that had governed North American trade for decades. Assumptions that had mapping out North American trade in which Canada could reduce reliance on the U.S. market, in which Canada maintaining stability across U.S. markets, while maintaining stability across manufacturing dependence. They looked at agricultural exports, manufacturing financial linkages, agricultural exports, and financial linkages, and what they discovered, Canada was more flexible than anyone had assumed. Canada and the United States was more exposed than it realized. And the United States was more leaked American projections arrived. They confirmed the leaked American projections precision. They confirmed internal models with startling potential cost increases internal for American industries. If Canadian supply chains were American industries, yet those Canadian supply chains were prioritized in favor of a narrative had been emphasized leverage in favor of a narrative. In other words, the strategy relied on Canada behaving exactly as strategy relied on Carney's behaving exactly as that expectation. Carney's response would ensure that expectation was shattered. Calls were placed to officials within the European Union. Calls were placed to officials within the European Union, not to negotiate of existing agreements, but to explore acceleration of existing agreements. Were dispatched to Japan and South Korea. Trade envoys were dispatched focused on expanding supply chain integration, focused on expanding long-term demand for Canadian exports, and securing long-term demand for Canadian exports. Back-channel communications were initiated with stakeholders in China, not as a pivot away from Western alliance. China, but as a calculated move to Western alliance, Canada would have calculated moves to ensure that Canada would have multiple developments for its North America, regardless of these efforts developments in North America. Nothing in public discourse these efforts a dramatic shift. Nothing in public discourse suggested a dramatic shift. Diplomatic official statements remained cooperation. Diplomatic language emphasized cooperation. Contracts were being renegotiated. The surface, logistics contracts were being renegotiated, and investment flows were beginning to adjust. In anticipation of a new reality, beginning to adjust. By the time the broader world began to notice, the transformation broader world began to notice, the transformation became visible. Data rather than declarations. Unusual movements in commodity markets, particularly unusual movements in commodity market pricing patterns, particularly in lumber, Canadian exporters pricing prioritizing new buyers. Canadian exporters at the BBC and the Guardian began connecting these BBC diplomatic activity began previously gone unnoticed. Diplomatic economists that had previously University unnoticed conducted rapid analysis from Oxford University that the changes were not random fluctuations, confirming that the changes were not random fluctuations. Before we roll the footage, just one thing. If you enjoy our roll the footage, drop a like, just one thing. Hit subscribe. If you enjoy our work, 98% of you are watching without subscribing. Over 98% of you are watching without subscribing. Let's change that right now. Everything we do. It's free for you, but it fuels everything we do. Enjoy the video. Subscribed? Perfect. Inside the United States, the initial response was inside the United States. Advisors the initial response was skepticism. Developments as temporary or exaggerated. Dismissed maintaining confidence that Canada would ultimately return to the negotiating table under pressure. Ultimately, public rhetoric continued unchanged. Pressure. Emphasizing public rhetoric continued unchanged. Internally, emphasizing tone began to shift.
As updated models revealed that supply chain disruptions could have broader consequences than anticipated, could have broader consequences under the assumption of seamless cross-border integration under the assumption of seamless cross-border integration. The construction sector was among the first to feel the impact. Construction companies was among the rising costs linked to reduced access to Canadian costs, linked once reduced access to Canadian lumber, became subject to new market dynamics, where alternative buyers offered more favorable terms, where alternative automotive industry soon followed, with manufacturers noting delays and shortages tied to manufacturers noting delays and shortages no longer guaranteed. Pharmaceutical distributors raised concerns about access to generic medications, raised concerns highlighting the interconnectedness of healthcare supply chains, highlighting the interconnectedness of healthcare supply chains amid this unfolding situation. Warren Buffett entered the conversation with a statement that resonated far beyond its measured tone. Speaking during an interview, Buffett observed that markets have a way of correcting assumptions. Buffett observed that markets have a way of correcting assumptions that no longer reflect criticism. And while he did not frame his comment as a criticism between the United States and Canada, the situation between the United States and Canada was no longer governed by traditional expectations. It entered a phase where outcomes would be determined by adaptation rather than dominance. Portfolio adjustments reflected growing awareness of portfolio adjustments reflected growing awareness of risk exposure, while capital began flowing toward Canadian imports, positioned to benefit from Canada's expanding global position to benefit from Canada's expanding global more responsive than political markets, signaled that the shift was being taken seriously, signaled that the shift fallout in Washington intensified as the economic fallout in Washington became harder to ignore, as the economic implications in northern states expressed concern about rising energy costs and supply chain disruptions, rising energy costs the decades supply chain disruptions could not be unwound without consequences. Could not be unwound without consequences. Seeking clarity on a situation that appeared to be evolving clarity on a situation that appeared to be evolving faster than anticipated emerged between those advocating for continued pressure and those urging a reassessment of strategy and those urging a reassessment of strategy. Carney was initiated. A request for direct communication that the situation required engagement recognition that the situation required engagement at the highest level, reinforced the new dynamic. While Canada was open to dialogue, new dynamic only within structured frameworks that reflected its revised position. Structured frameworks that reactive negotiation were over. The days of international negotiation underscored the broader significance of the moment. The response underscored within the broader significance of the moment. Signaled readiness officials within the European Union signaled viewing the country as a stable partner in Canada, increasingly uncertain environment. Representatives increasingly from Japan and South Korea emphasized the importance of reliability in trade relations. Emphasized the importance of reliability in trade relationships with the unpredictability that emerged elsewhere, with the unpredictability that emerged elsewhere, as evidence of shifting influence, interpreted the situation that the global balance was becoming more fluid, suggesting that the global balance was becoming more fluid to the evolving narrative. Academic by examining the structural implications of Canada's strategy, examining the structural implications of Canada's strategy, highlighted the concept by Oxford University, highlighted the concept that Canada's approach could serve as a model for other countries seeking to reduce dependency on dominant countries seeking to reduce dependency on dominant era of unilateral leverage in trade relationships might be giving way to a more distributed system, might be giving way to a more distributed system against shocks. Multiple connections provided stability. Carney maintained a consistent focus on execution rather than messaging. Consistent focus on execution rather than preparation. His public statements and long-term preparation reinforced the idea that Canada's actions were not a response to immediate Canada's actions part of a broader strategy designed to ensure stability in a changing world. Designed to ensure stability in a changing world. Policymakers. This approach resonated with investors and policymakers who recognized increasingly valuable in an environment characterized by rapid valuable in an environment. The human dimension of the situation became more apparent. The human individual stories emerged. Became more apparent as individual stories emerged. Challenges and securing American business owners managing costs. costs,
challenges
while workers in affected industries
managing
expressed
costs,
concern
while
about
workers
job
in
stability.
affected industries
Canadian
expressed
exporters
concern
spoke about
job
opportunities created
Canadian
by new
exporters
markets,
spoke
highlighting
about
the
opportunities
dual nature of
created
the
by new
transformation.
markets.
Highlighting the dual nature of
underscored
the
the
transformation.
fact that the crisis
These
was not
perspectives
abstract.
underscore
It
the
was being
fact that the
experienced
crisis
in
was
real
not
time by
abstract.
people
It
whose
was being
livelihood